Hey everybody, today we've got something very different from the usual. We're actually going to be looking at a couple of the boss fights with our Dominating Blow Templar over here. We've started with a tier 14 Conqueror. It's not as tanky as the other ones, but the reason we're showing off this start right here is just to show that, especially when you're fighting the Conquerors, the boss fight before the Conqueror is actually incredibly important. In that first phase there, we're going around targeting all the magic monsters that we can. Unfortunately, in this boss, no rare monsters spawn. What you can do is the metamorph to do that, but that's more valuable if you die, which usually you shouldn't. But as you can see here, we've got our tier 14 Drox, and he just utterly melts. For the most part, you can face tank everything he does. In tier 16, you might want to juke that fist, but if you've got your steel skin and you've got your fortify up, you can just sit there and DPS him down. Tier 16 Drox has, what, like double the triple the health, so this, 15-second boss fight becomes like a 1-minute boss fight, so that's no big deal. The second one we're going to show off here is Al-Hazmin the Hunter, and the reason why is his middle phase is notorious for killing minions because they're so dumb. This is tier 15, so he's a little tankier. Tier 16 is a little tankier yet again, but the nice thing here is once he stops to do that, you just convoke your minions on top of him, and everything is fine. So with both of those, it's really important that you get your minions up before the fight, just to make it as quickly as possible. The Warlord one, just because he takes so long, and the Hunter one, because if you don't DPS him down fast enough, he will kill a bunch of your minions. As you can see here, we do have a final fight here, Awakener 8. This is my second only Awakener 8, only my 4th or 5th Awakener of the league, so the gameplay is a little rusty. I'm still learning a bit of the mechanics, but for the most part they're incredibly easy to do with this build. I know other builds have an easier time with some of it or a harder time with some of it. We are, again, name-lock melee, so if we were Cyclone, we could be moving around while we deal damage to the die, while he's doing the die beam, and so forth. And if you're ranged, obviously there's a bunch of advantages in these fight. But this is a bit of a showcase of how easy the fight can be to do on name-lock melee if you have a shit ton of minions to do a bunch of damage for you. So the key point of this fight is actually, if you see these citizens here, we're going to be trying to keep those... No, I'm not. We're kidding. The main thing is that these first two phases are really easy. Every couple of seconds when he pauses, just wait to hear the die, strafe around behind him, and just keep attacking him. Keep your fortify up, that also keeps your vulnerability up, and keep your minions up as much as possible. He does do the storm phase here, and the shorter the storm phase lasts, the better off we are. Less of our minions will despawn, hopefully none, and we also have to worry less about losing fortify for the upcoming fight, or just getting in trouble in general with all this mess that goes on. With his big rotating laser that heads in a direction, they'll meet up and explode when they do that. Just don't stand in the center. Don't stand on those explosion, starfall areas there. And then once you go to stand under him, it will activate the fight again. And again, you can see here we can just DPS him down. We do, unfortunately, have him spawning all those degens on the ground there. And then a little meteor, which really no worries about that. But we do have him spawning the degens on the ground on top of him, which is rough as name-lock, especially because it starts to kill our minions. You can see our carrying golem is starting to die a little here, and the big line ball throwing phase is also pretty good at killing our minions. But as long as we can keep them away from the storms, we're pretty happy. You can see we do actually get a little bit pinned in here, but most of his attacks are actually very limited range, and they are all very very well telegraphed. Just don't stand in any of the ground effects. Don't stand in the explosion there. The storm is moving towards us, but as soon as we get a chance, we just drop under him. We waited a little longer than we needed to there just to make sure we were safe, and so we did lose all of our summons, unfortunately, and it's going to take us a little while to get them back up. And again, he spawns the degen on him. He drops the meteor. Once you get out of the meteor, try to convoke so that your minions don't actually eat shit to the meteor. I don't actually know if they take damage. I'm pretty good at convoking them out, so I'm not sure how consistent that is. You can see we've already got him DPS down to the second phase there, and we're 3 minutes, I think, into this fight. I know there are much faster Awakener clear times. We do get stuck a little in this storm here, and we end up eating a bunch of shit, and our minions do die a little. Thankfully, our Carrion Golem, which is by far the squishiest of our permanent summons, stays alive, and that's one of the reasons we've got it on our hotbar. This fight would be easier with a Val Haste, get our minions to jump in on him a little bit better as well, but we're still running Val Summon Skeletons, which we should be throwing down, but just because of the cluster fun this fight involves, I try to avoid dropping those so that I can see a little better. I'm not great at dodging this phase. As you can see, we kind of almost dodged right back into it there, but then we've got another Meteor phase here. We do pop our Quicksilver, which normally you don't need for the rest of the fight, then convoke our minions to get them outside. Almost getting hit by the die beam, but we managed to strafe just to the side enough. The 4 beam is actually awesome. During that phase, you can kind of just DPS him down. Now, unfortunately, we're going to walk through the beams here, and that's fine. But that was a dumb death. I thought I had strafed around him enough. Like, I knew that was coming in. Just make sure you keep strafing. I got a little greedy and wanted to make sure that I was getting to proc more minions. Don't get greedy when he does the die beam. Just keep strafing around him. The closer you are, the easier it is to avoid that. He does rotate a little while using the beam, so that's a bit of an issue. 2 Storm right at the start here. I'd take a look around that side, say, nope, we're not going that way. Convoke your minions, just make sure they stay close to you and they don't die. But then we hop back into the fight here. He hops into his giant feel the thrill of the void, whatever. And then we get ready because he's going to do a die beam pretty soon. He does drop the columns again, or the line, the dodgeball portion of the fight, which is a little bit of an issue for us, so we do kind of try to stop that. For some reason, oh, it's not this one. We don't need to worry too much about eating the spinning laser beams. We really want to make sure we're getting our minions up as fast as possible, so even if it requires you to eat one of these beams, my suggestion is focus on DPSing him down. The build is tanky enough. As you can see, good juke there. We could have kept this phase up, and it probably would have been the right decision. You'll see in a minute, but mostly, again, focus on juking. The Meteor phase, as usual, is a little bit irritating, and for some reason, our minions didn't quite get brought to us. I don't notice his health bar for whatever reason. I'm blind as a bat, and so I don't get to DPS down there. And you can see we do actually just desync there, I'm pretty sure. On my screen, I had moved, and then we die to the die beam because the game thinks that we're there, and obviously if it thinks you're there for the first hit, you get stunned into the rest of the hits. Coming into the end of the fight, this is actually really hard now that we've died a couple times. All our permanent minions are up, but now we have none of our temporary minions, and so we have no chance of doing damage to him unless we get a good chance to go name lock and beat him up. If you can keep your... we almost dodged into that. I forgot about that. If you can keep your minions up during these middle phases of the fight, during the middle phases of the fight not die, you'll have a much easier time. And as you can see here, knowing that he's so low, we do just face tank this. A lot of our minions die, but it ends up being absolutely trivially easy to just DPS him down for the last quarter there. Obviously, if we hadn't died to that first die beam, we would have had him significantly more injured much earlier in the fight. So that's basically an Awakener 8 fight. There's one monster left. It's either Xana or us, who knows. And yeah, nothing great for loot, but an Awakened Added Coal is nice. That goes for a couple builds that I might want to look into next. Maybe a callback to one of my old builds. But yeah, there we go. That's Awakener 8, totally Awakener 8 viable, and up next is probably Shaper.